Before we begin, a quick and important disclaimer. The information presented in this video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. The statistics, historical trends, and case studies discussed regarding family law, custody arrangements, and demographic shifts do not constitute legal, financial, or psychological advice. Family law varies significantly by jurisdiction and individual circumstances. Viewers are strongly encouraged to conduct their own due diligence and consult with qualified legal professionals or licensed experts before making decisions related to divorce, custody, or financial planning. In 1924, a divorced father in the United States was a statistical ghost. If you walked down a residential street in a major American city a century ago, the odds of encountering a man living apart from his children due to a dissolved marriage were nearly zero. To be a divorced dad then was to be a social pariah, often stripped of both his reputation and his right to see his offspring. But fast forward to the present day, and the landscape has undergone a seismic, almost unrecognizable transformation. Today, nearly 1/4 of American children live in single-parent households, and the demographic of the American father has been completely rewritten by decades of legislative shifts, economic volatility, and a fundamental revolution in how we define masculinity. We are currently witnessing the most significant shift in paternal demographics in human history, yet most of the conversation is stuck in the tropes of the 1990s. We often hear about the deadbeat dad or the weekend warrior, but the data tells a far more complex and high-stakes story. This deep dive serves as a masterclass for anyone trying to navigate or understand the current reality of the American family. Whether you are a father currently navigating the family court system, a professional tracking social trends, or simply someone trying to understand how we reach this point, this analysis solves the problem of misinformation. We are moving past the anecdotes and diving into the hard numbers to explain why the modern divorced father looks nothing like his grandfather. By the end of this series, you will understand the historical trends that led to the current custody standards, the potential outcomes for fathers in the modern economy, and the specific demographic data points that are currently reshaping the American middle class. We are pulling back the curtain on a century of change to show you exactly where the American father stands in 2026. To understand the present, we must go back to the beginning of this century of change. In the early 1920s, the legal framework governing divorce was rooted in the fault-based system. To obtain a divorce, one party had to prove a specific transgression, such as adultery, abandonment, or extreme cruelty. For fathers of that era, the demographic reality was dictated by the tender years doctrine. This legal presumption suggested that during a child's young, tender years, the mother was the naturally superior caregiver. Consequently, fathers were almost systematically excluded from primary custody. In 1920, census data suggests that fathers were the primary householders in fewer than 1% of dissolved family units. The divorced dad was often a man who had either been cast out of his community or had physically relocated to start an entirely new life, leaving the previous family unit behind. This created a demographic of invisible men whose financial contributions were rarely regulated by the state, and whose emotional involvement was not prioritized by the courts. By the 1940s and 1950s, the post-war boom created a new demographic pressure. The nuclear family was the bedrock of American stability, and divorce rates remained relatively low, hovering around 2 per 1,000 people. However, the fathers who did divorce during this period began to reflect the emerging industrial economy. These were men who were increasingly defined by their ability to provide alimony. The demographic shift here moved from the social pariah to the provider from a distance. Historical trends show that during the mid-20th century, the legal system began to formalize child support, though enforcement remained localized and often ineffective. The divorced father was still a secondary character in the lives of his children, typically relegated to the every other weekend visitation schedule that would dominate the American consciousness for the next 50 years. The true explosion in demographic data occurs in the late 1960s and 1970s with the introduction of no-fault divorce laws. California led the way in 1969, and by the mid-70s the majority of states had followed suit. This was the tipping point. Divorce rates doubled between 1960 and 1980. Suddenly, the divorced dad was no longer a rare outlier. He was a standard feature of the American workforce. This era introduced the first major wave of the modern divorce demographic. These fathers were the first to encounter a system that was transitioning away from the tender years doctrine toward the best interests of the child standard. However, the transition was messy. While the law became gender neutral on paper, the demographic reality remained skewed. In 1975, mothers were still awarded sole physical custody in approximately 90% of cases. As we moved into the 1990s and early 2000s, a new demographic subgroup emerged: the active co-parent. This shift was driven by the entry of more women into the workforce, which disrupted the traditional breadwinner homemaker model. As mothers' incomes rose, fathers' roles in the home began to be reevaluated. Data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics during this period shows a steady increase in the amount of time divorced fathers spent on childcare. The demographic was no longer just providing a check, they were seeking a percentage of time. This led to the rise of joint custody as a legal and social norm. Case studies from this era indicate that as states began to adopt presumptive joint custody laws, the demographic profile of the divorced father shifted from a visitor to a stakeholder. By 2020, the demographic data revealed a startling new reality. According to U.S. Census Bureau reports, the number of single-father households had increased ninefold since 1960. We are now seeing a demographic that is more diverse, more involved, and more economically varied than ever before. In the modern era, specifically looking at data from 2024 through 2026, we see that divorced fathers are increasingly falling into three distinct demographic buckets. First, there is the 50-50 co-punter, who maintains an equal or near-equal residential split. This group is most common in the suburban middle class, where flexible work arrangements allow for complex scheduling. Second, we have the primary custodial father, a demographic that has seen a 15% increase in the last decade alone. These are men who, through either court intervention or mutual agreement, serve as the main residents for their children. Third, we see the geographically distant father, a group shaped by the modern remote work economy, where fathers may live hundreds of miles away but maintain deep emotional and financial ties through digital connectivity. The economic implications for these demographics are profound. Historical trends indicate that divorced fathers often experience a short-term increase in per capita disposable income immediately following a split, but this is frequently offset by the long-term costs of maintaining two separate households capable of housing children. Furthermore, the modern divorced father is navigating a legal system that is increasingly focused on the quantification of parenting time. In 2026, the demographics show that fathers who are more involved in the day-to-day logistics of their children's lives, such as school transportation and medical appointments, are more likely to maintain long-term stability in their custody arrangements. This is a departure from the mid-century model, where financial provision was the sole metric of a father's success. In this deep dive, we must also address the demographic impact of the aging father. We are seeing a rise in the gray divorce phenomenon, where men over the age of 50 are entering the divorce demographic for the first time. This creates a unique set of challenges and data points, particularly regarding adult children and the division of retirement assets. These fathers aren't fighting for custody of toddlers. They are navigating the demographic shift of becoming a single patriarch in a multi-generational family. The data suggests that these men often struggle more with social isolation than their younger counterparts, highlighting a need for a shift in how we support the mental health of this specific demographic. Step by step, we have watched the American father evolve from a man who lost everything in 1920 to a man who, in 2026, is fighting for, and often achieving, an equal seat at the table. This is not just a story of legal changes. It is a story of a demographic asserting its value in the domestic sphere. As we move forward in this deep dive, we will examine the specific economic pressures, the psychological outcomes, and the state-by-state variations that define the life of the modern American divorced father. The century of change is not just a look back. It is a roadmap for where the American family is heading next. We have moved from the shadow of the law into the light of shared responsibility, and the numbers prove that there is no going back. To understand the trajectory of the modern American father, we have to examine the sharp pivot that occurred between the mid-century industrial era and the current digital landscape of 2026. In the 1950s, the demographic profile of a divorced father was almost exclusively defined by his absence. Imagine a man named Arthur in 1954. Arthur is a mid-level manager at a manufacturing firm in Ohio. When his marriage dissolves, the societal expectation is that he will retreat to a small apartment, provide a monthly check that covers roughly 30% of his former household expenses, and see his children on Sunday afternoons for a few hours. In Arthur's world, the demographic data shows that nearly 80% of fathers in his position would lose contact with their children entirely within 3 years. This was the era of the disposable father, a demographic shaped by a legal system that viewed paternal involvement as optional and paternal income as the only relevant metric. But the 1950s model was unsustainable as the American economy shifted. By the time we reach the 1970s and 1980s, the demographic begins to fracture. The introduction of no-fault divorce triggered a surge in the sheer number of divorced men. But it also created a massive group of fathers who were economically vulnerable. During this period, the breadwinner trap became a defining demographic feature. Men were still expected to be the primary earners, but the stagnant wages of the late 70s meant that many divorced fathers could no longer afford to support two households. Historical trends from the 1980s show a significant spike in fathers falling below the poverty line following a divorce, a statistic that was rarely discussed in the media of the time, which preferred to focus on the rising number of single mothers. Now, let us jump forward to 2026 and look at a character named Mark. Mark is a 42-year-old software implementation specialist living in a high-cost urban center like Denver. Mark represents the modern demographic shift toward the integrated co-parent. Unlike Arthur in 1954, Mark has 50-50 residential custody. His demographic reality is defined by a grueling schedule of logistics. He isn't just an ATM. He is a primary caregiver half of the time. However, this has created a new demographic pressure point: the double housing burden. In 2026, the cost of housing has outpaced wage growth for the last decade. For a father like Mark to maintain joint custody, he is often legally and socially required to provide a bedroom for each child in his home. This means Mark is paying for a 3-bedroom apartment on a single income, an economic reality that was virtually non-existent for the divorced dads of the 1920s. Data from 2025 indicates that divorced fathers with joint custody spend an average of 45% of their post-tax income on housing alone. The demographic evolution also reveals a massive divide in educational attainment. In 2026, we see two very different worlds for divorced dads. Case studies show that fathers with at least a 4-year degree are nearly 3 times more likely to navigate the family court system successfully to secure joint custody compared to fathers with only a high school diploma. This isn't just about the ability to pay for high-end legal representation. It is about administrative competence. The modern divorce process in 2026 involves a mountain of digital paperwork, the use of mandatory co-parenting apps like Our Family Wizard or Talking Parents, and the ability to interpret complex child support guidelines. Fathers who lack the digital literacy or the time to manage these platforms find themselves demographically pushed into the marginalized father category, where they slowly lose parenting time due to a failure to keep up with the administrative demands of the court. Step by step, the way a father's value is calculated has changed. In 1926, it was about character and social standing. In 1976, it was about his paycheck. In 2026, it is about his presence and compliance. We are seeing a demographic of men who are more involved than any generation in history, yet they are also more surveilled. Every text message, every late drop-off, and every disagreement over a soccer practice schedule is now a permanent digital record that can be used to alter his demographic status from a 50-50 parent to a weekend visitor. This has led to the rise of the hypervigilant father, a demographic of men who are meticulously documenting their lives to prove their worth to a system that, historically, was designed to exclude them. Imagine a scenario where a father in 2026 loses his job in the middle of a custody transition. In the 1950s, this might have resulted in a simple delay in payments. In 2026, the demographic risk is much higher, because his role is now tied to his residential time. A loss of income that leads to a loss of stable housing can result in an immediate and drastic reduction in his time with his children. This creates a high-stakes environment where the divorced father must maintain perfect economic stability to retain his paternal rights. The data shows that the modern divorced dad is less likely to take career risks or switch jobs compared to his married counterparts because the potential outcomes of a financial hiccup are so catastrophic for his family structure. Furthermore, we must look at the gray divorce demographic of 2026. Men over the age of 55 are divorcing at rates double what they were in the 1990s. These men are often the forgotten demographic of the divorce world. They aren't fighting for custody of small children, but they are facing a demographic crisis of social isolation. Unlike women of the same age, who often have robust social networks, divorced men in this age bracket frequently find that their social ties were maintained by their wives. Historical trends show that men who divorce after 25 years of marriage experience a significant decline in health outcomes within the first 5 years of the split. This is a demographic that is wealthy in terms of assets but impoverished in terms of social capital. This demographic shift also touches on the gig economy father. In 2026, a significant portion of divorced dads are no longer working traditional 9-to-5 jobs. They are driving for rideshare platforms, taking freelance consulting gigs, or managing multiple streams of income. While this provides the flexibility needed to handle school pickups and sick days, it makes them an anomaly in the eyes of the family court. The current child support formulas in many states are still built on the assumption of a steady, predictable salary. This puts the gig economy father in a demographic trap where his support obligations are based on his best months, leaving him drowning during his leanest months. We are also seeing a rise in the international divorced dad. With the rise of remote work and global mobility, more American fathers are navigating divorces where the mother and children may reside in a different state or even a different country. The demographics of these long-distance dads have shifted thanks to video technology. In 1926, a father who moved for work was essentially gone. In 2026, he is a virtual parent, maintaining a presence through high-definition screens. However, the data suggests that virtual parenting is a poor substitute for physical presence, and these fathers often report the highest levels of dissatisfaction and psychological strain. As we look at these layers, the economic burden of two households, the administrative requirements of the court, the education gap, and the rise of gray divorce, we see a demographic in the midst of a profound identity crisis. The American divorced father of 2026 is expected to be as nurturing as a 1950s mother and as financially productive as a 1950s father, all while navigating a housing market and a legal system that are increasingly unforgiving. The numbers tell us that while fathers are winning more time, they are also carrying more stress than ever before. But what does this do to the man himself? How does this constant pressure to perform and document affect the actual bond between father and child? And more importantly, what happens when the financial burden becomes too much for the system to handle? In the next part, we are going to look at the silent health crisis that is currently devastating this demographic. We will dive into the data on life expectancy, the specific psychological triggers that lead to the paternal burnout phenomenon, and why the medical community is only just now starting to recognize the unique health risks faced by divorced fathers in the modern era. We will explore the hidden costs of the strong father mask and what the potential outcomes are for the next generation of men watching their fathers navigate this century of change. To understand why the health of the modern divorced father has become a critical demographic data point in 2026, we have to look at the intersection of biology and sociology. For nearly a century, the medical community focused primarily on the health outcomes of children and mothers following a family split. However, recent longitudinal studies tracking men from 2015 through 2026 have revealed what researchers now call the divorce mortality gap. Historical trends indicate that divorced men have a significantly higher risk of premature death compared to their married or single never-married counterparts. In fact, some data suggest that the health risks associated with being a divorced father are comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. This is not due to a single factor, but a compounding series of demographic and physiological stressors that we need to deconstruct. Imagine if you are a man named James in 2026. James is 45 years old, a middle manager in a logistics firm in Atlanta. He is 3 years post-divorce and shares equal custody of his 2 children. On the surface, James is the picture of the successful modern father. He never misses a soccer game, he manages the shared digital calendar with precision, and he pays his obligations on time. But James is wearing the strong father mask. This is a demographic phenomenon where men feel immense pressure to prove their competency to the court, their ex-spouse, and society by suppressing any sign of physical or emotional struggle. Because James knows that any admission of not being okay could potentially be documented and used as evidence of instability in a future custody hearing, he ignores the persistent tightness in his chest and the fact that he has only been sleeping 4 hours a night for 6 months. The biological cost of this mask is measurable. When we look at the data on allostatic load, the wear and tear on the body which accumulates as an individual is exposed to repeated or chronic stress, divorced fathers in 2026 show significantly higher levels of cortisol and inflammatory markers than almost any other male demographic. Step by step, here is how that physiological breakdown occurs. First, the initial separation triggers a massive spike in the sympathetic nervous system. For many men, the home is not just a residence. It is their primary source of social regulation. When that is removed, the body enters a state of chronic fight or flight. Second, the transition into the 50-50 co-parenting model, while beneficial for the children, creates a cyclical stress response. Every Sunday evening during the custody exchange, men like James experience a surge in blood pressure and heart rate. Case studies show that the transition day is the most common time for divorced fathers to experience cardiovascular events. Furthermore, the demographic of the divorced father in 2026 is grappling with the friendship recession. In the mid-20th century, men often found community in fraternal organizations, unions, or local clubs. Today, these social pillars have largely eroded. Historical trends show that married men typically rely on their wives for social scheduling and emotional processing. When the marriage ends, the father's social circle often evaporates overnight. By 2026, census data indicates that 40% of divorced fathers report having no close friends to whom they can speak about their personal challenges. This social isolation isn't just a feeling, it is a demographic killer. It leads to a lack of accountability for health behaviors. Without a partner or a close social group to notice the subtle signs of declining health, the weight gain, the increased alcohol consumption, or the neglect of preventative screenings, the divorced father often doesn't enter the medical system until a crisis occurs. Let's look at the specific data on paternal burnout. In 2026, we are seeing a 25% increase in fathers reporting symptoms of clinical exhaustion. This is directly tied to the integrated co-parent model we discussed previously, because the modern father is expected to be a primary caregiver, while also maintaining the same professional output as his childless colleagues. He often sacrifices his own recovery time. Imagine if James, during his week with the children, works a full shift, handles the school run, cooks dinner, manages bedtime, and then stays up until 1 a.m. to finish the work he missed during the day. He repeats this for 7 days. Then during his off week, he doesn't rest. Instead, he uses that time to work overtime to cover the high costs of his separate household or catches up on the chores he neglected. There is no recovery period. This demographic is literally running their engines at redline until the hardware fails. This health crisis has a direct impact on the intergenerational outcomes for the next generation. We are currently observing the first cohort of children in 2026, whose fathers were part of the widespread joint custody revolution. These sons and daughters are watching their fathers navigate this high-pressure landscape. Potential outcomes for these children are mixed. On one hand, they benefit from the increased presence of their fathers. On the other hand, they are witnessing the strong father mask firsthand. Data suggests that sons of divorced fathers who do not manage their stress effectively are 30% more likely to struggle with their own emotional regulation by the time they reach early adulthood. The demographic legacy of the divorced dad is shifting from the man who left to the man who stayed but broke himself in the process. The demographic shift also reveals a hidden crisis in substance use trends. Historical trends in the 1990s showed that divorced men were more likely to engage in binge behaviors. However, in 2026, the data shows a move toward functional coping. This involves the use of prescription stimulants to keep up with work demands or alcohol to wind down in an empty house on non-custody weeks. Because these men are functional, meaning they still show up to work and pick up their kids, their decline is often invisible to the outside world. Case studies from family law practitioners in 2026 suggest that substance use is becoming a primary factor in post-judgment litigation, as the mask begins to slip over time. To address this, we have to look at the economic health link. In 2026, the cost of medical care and mental health services remains a barrier for the demographic of fathers who are already stretched thin by child support and dual housing costs. When a father has to choose between paying for his child's orthodontic work or his own therapy session, the therapy session is discarded 90% of the time. This creates a demographic that is rich in responsibility, but poor in self-care. We are seeing the rise of shadow demographics, where men are physically present in the workforce and their children's lives, but they are psychologically and physiologically depleted. So, where does this leave the American father? We have documented how the law changed, how the economy shifted, and how the body responds to these pressures. We have seen that the modern divorced dad is more involved than ever, but he is also more vulnerable than ever. The data is clear. The current model of the super co-parent is hitting a biological ceiling. But there is another layer to this story that is even more controversial and less discussed in the mainstream media. It is the architectural foundation of the entire divorce system, the money. In the next part, we are going to dive into the financial architecture of 2026. We will break down the hidden math of child support formulas the demographic impact of alimony reform, and the shocking reality of how a father's credit score can become the ultimate gatekeeper of his parental rights. We will explore how the Title IV funding system works behind the scenes, and why your state might have a massive financial incentive to keep fathers in a specific demographic category. If you think the health data was eye-opening, wait until you see the flow of the money. To follow the money in 2026, we have to look at the machinery that powers the American family court system, a structure that has evolved from a decentralized set of local rules into a massive, federally incentivized financial engine. At the heart of this engine is Title IV of the Social Security Act. This is perhaps the most significant, yet least understood, piece of legislation impacting the demographics of divorced fathers. Historically, Title IV was designed to ensure that the government could recoup welfare costs from non-custodial parents. However, by 2026, its reach has expanded to nearly every divorce involving children in the United States. Under this program, the federal government provides incentive payments to states based on several performance metrics, including the total amount of child support collected and the number of cases with established orders. This creates a systemic inertia. Imagine if a state's budget for social services is tied, in part, to the volume of child support moving through its collection units. The demographic impact is profound. There is a structural resistance to downward modifications of support. Even when a father's income drops or he gains more parenting time, the administrative process to lower an order is often characterized by significant friction. Case studies from 2025 and early 2026 show that while a father can be ordered to pay more within a single hearing, the process to reduce those payments often takes an average of 6 to 9 months of litigation. This lag time creates a demographic of fathers who are technically in arrears not because they are unwilling to pay, but because the legal system cannot keep pace with the volatility of the modern labor market. Let us look at a case study involving a man named David in 2026. David is a project manager in Charlotte, North Carolina. He earns $95,000 a year. Under the income shares model, which is used by the majority of U.S. states, the court looks at the combined income of both parents and calculates what a typical intact family would spend on a child. Then, that cost is divided proportionally. In 1996, this model was seen as a fair way to distribute costs. But in 2026, the math is hitting a wall. David's state-calculated support obligation is $1,200 a month for his 2 children. On paper, this seems manageable for someone earning nearly 6 figures. However, the demographic data of 2026 reveals the invisible variables. David's rent for a 2-bedroom apartment that meets the court standards for his children has risen to $2,700 a month. After federal and state taxes, health insurance premiums for the children, and his child support payment, David is left with approximately $1,600 for his own food, utilities, car payment, and student loans. David represents a growing demographic, known as the working poor professional. He is a man who, by all traditional metrics, is successful, yet he is living paycheck to paycheck because the child support formulas in many states have not been updated to reflect the hyperinflation in housing and energy costs that characterized the early 2020s. Furthermore, we must examine the weaponization of credit in the 2026 financial landscape. Under the 1996 Welfare Reform Act, states are mandated to report child support arrears to credit bureaus. In the current economy, where your credit score is the ultimate gatekeeper for housing, transportation, and even employment, this creates a catastrophic feedback loop. If David misses 2 payments because of an unexpected medical bill or a temporary layoff, his credit score can drop by over 100 points. This drop prevents him from refinancing his car or moving to a more affordable apartment. In some states, a lack of payment can even lead to the suspension of his professional license or driver's license. This is the demographic trap. The system demands a father work to pay his obligations, but then strips him of the tools required to work if he falls behind. Alimony or spousal support has also undergone a radical demographic shift. Historical trends show that in the 1970s, alimony was often permanent. By 2026, most states have moved toward rehabilitative or durational alimony. While this is intended to encourage the lower-earning spouse to become self-sufficient, it still creates a high-stakes financial cliff for the father. In many 2026 case studies, we see the phenomenon of the double burden, where a father is paying both child support and durational alimony while simultaneously trying to fund his own retirement. Because most divorce settlements involve the division of 401k and IRA assets, the divorced father in his 40s or 50s is often starting his retirement savings from zero, while carrying the highest overhead of his life. The 2026 demographic data also highlights the rise of the digital overhead. Divorced fathers are now required to pay for a suite of services that didn't exist 20 years ago. This includes subscriptions to court-mandated communication apps, the cost of high-speed internet for a child's remote schooling needs at 2 different houses, and the rising cost of digital security for shared accounts. Individually, these are small costs. Collectively, they represent a 3 to 5% tax on the father's net income that is rarely accounted for in the state's basic support formulas. Step by step, the financial life cycle of a 2026 divorce looks like this. First, there is the immediate liquidation of liquid assets to pay for legal retainers, which in 2026 average between $5,000 and $10,000 per parent for a contested case. Second, there is the establishment of the monthly support order, which is typically extracted via automated income withholding. This shift to automatic withholding has changed the demographic perception of the father from a voluntary provider to a passive source of revenue. Third, there is the long-term struggle with the fixed cost gap, where the father's support obligation remains static, while his personal cost of living fluctuates with the economy. Imagine if David's company moves to a remote-only model, and he wants to move to a lower-cost area to save money. In many jurisdictions, his child support is based on his earning capacity, not just his actual earnings. If the court decides that he is voluntarily underemployed by taking a lower-paying job in a cheaper city, they can impute his income at the higher level. This anchors the divorced father to high-stress, high-cost urban centers, preventing the geographic mobility that is often necessary for financial recovery. This demographic is literally stuck in place by a legal and financial framework that prioritizes the stability of the collection over the economic health of the payer. This financial architecture is not just about the numbers, it is about the power dynamic it creates. When one parent becomes the primary collector and the other becomes the primary payer, it introduces a transactional element into the parenting relationship that can be difficult to overcome. The data shows that financial conflict is the #1 predictor of post-divorce litigation. As long as the system provides financial incentives for the state to maintain high orders and for parents to maximize their time-based share of the child to lower their payments, the demographic of the divorced father will remain in a state of perpetual economic high alert. But there is a human cost to this math that goes beyond the bank account. What happens when a father feels like he is nothing more than a ghost in his own life? A man whose only remaining connection to his family is a line item on a pay stub. What happens when the pressure to maintain the financial facade leads to a break in the very bond the court is supposed to protect? In the next part, we are going to go inside the courtroom itself. We will look at the demographics of the judiciary in 2026 and examine the persistent, documented biases that still exist in the best interests of the child standard. We will explore the silver bullet phenomenon in litigation, and how a single allegation can permanently shift a father's demographic status overnight. We are moving from the wallet to the witness stand. The moment a father steps into a courtroom in 2026, he is no longer just a man, a parent, or a provider. He becomes a data point in a high-stakes demographic lottery. To understand the witness stand, we have to understand the people who sit above it. The judiciary in 2026 is a demographic study in itself. While the mid-century bench was dominated by a generation that viewed fathers as peripheral breadwinners, today's judges are largely drawn from the Gen X and early millennial cohorts. On the surface, this should favor the modern father. These are judges who, in their private lives, likely practiced hands-on parenting. However, the legal system operates on the principle of stare decisis, staying with things decided. This creates a demographic lag where the personal beliefs of a judge are often stifled by decades of case law that still subtly prioritizes the maternal bond as the primary anchor for a child's stability. Imagine a man named Robert in 2026. Robert is a 38-year-old systems analyst in Austin, Texas. He has been the primary caregiver on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons since his children were born, working a flexible remote schedule to handle the school run. When his marriage ends, Robert assumes the court will see his 50-50 contribution and codify it. But as he stands before the bench, he encounters the best interests of the child standard. This legal framework is often described by legal scholars as a black box. It is a list of factors, ranging from the emotional ties between parent and child to the home's physical safety, that the judge must weigh. The problem for the 2026 father is that these factors are entirely subjective. In Robert's case, his ex-spouse's legal team argues that while Robert is a capable parent, the children's routine is centered around the family home, which the mother is currently occupying. This brings us to the most controversial demographic modifier in the modern era: the silver bullet. In family law circles, this refers to the strategic use of an ex parte temporary restraining order or an allegation of domestic volatility to gain an immediate, lopsided advantage in parenting time. In 2026, the legal system's sensitivity to safety is at an all-time high. While this is a vital protection for actual victims, it has created a demographic trend where a father can be removed from his home and stripped of his parenting time within hours, based on a single unverified affidavit. Historical trends show that once a father is removed via a temporary order, it takes an average of 120 to 180 days to reach a full evidentiary hearing. During those 6 months, Robert's demographic status shifts from integrated co-parent to visiting defendant. Step by step, the system begins to favor the new status quo. When Robert finally gets his day in court, the judge may acknowledge that the initial allegations were unsubstantiated, but they will often cite the need for stability. The children have now spent half a year living primarily with their mother. The court is hesitant to disrupt that rhythm. This is the status quo bias, and in 2026, it is the single greatest hurdle for fathers seeking equal time. Case studies indicate that fathers who are hit with a silver bullet allegation are 60% less likely to achieve a 50-50 custody split, even if the allegations are eventually dismissed. We also have to look at the rise of the custody evaluator and the guardian ad litem as demographic gatekeepers. In 2026, judges are increasingly delegating their decision-making power to these third-party professionals. A custody evaluator is typically a forensic psychologist who spends months interviewing the family, observing interactions, and conducting psychological testing. For a father like Robert, this is a grueling process of professional surveillance. Every word he speaks is analyzed for signs of aggression or lack of insight. Data from 2025 suggests that these evaluators still carry a subconscious preference for the primary attachment figure, a role traditionally assigned to mothers. For a father to overcome this, he must be twice as prepared and half as emotional as his counterpart. Any sign of frustration with the slow-moving legal process is often documented as an inability to co-parent, further pushing him into a marginalized demographic category. Furthermore, the 2026 courtroom is a theater of digital forensics. In 1926, a father's character was judged by his reputation in the community. In 2026, it is judged by his text message history and his social media footprint. We are seeing a demographic of fathers who are being penalized for digital reactivity. Imagine if Robert, in a moment of high stress during the separation, sent a series of heated text messages about a late child support payment or a missed visitation. In the modern courtroom, those messages are enlarged on a 70-inch monitor and used to define his entire parental character. Historical trends in the last 5 years show a massive spike in the use of forensic digital audits in family law. The demographic of the modern divorced dad is now a permanently recorded one. There is no such thing as an off-the-record conversation when your smartphone is a witness for the prosecution. The impact of this high-conflict litigation on a father's demographic profile is not just legal. It is financial and psychological. The cost of a contested custody battle in a major U.S. city in 2026 can easily exceed $100,000 per side. This leads to the phenomenon of the litigated-out father. This is a man who may be an excellent parent but simply lacks the capital to continue the fight. He is forced to settle for a secondary role because he cannot afford the experts, the evaluators, and the attorneys required to challenge the status quo. This creates a class-based demographic split. Wealthy fathers can buy the time and experts needed to secure 50-50 custody, while working-class fathers are often funneled into a standard every other weekend schedule by default. This leads to a chilling potential outcome for the demographic of the American family. If the court system continues to reward the use of the silver bullet and fails to address the status quo bias, we risk creating a generation of fathers who are afraid to engage in the legal process at all. We are seeing a rise in the disengaged father, not because of a lack of love, but because of a perceived inability to win against a system that feels rigged from the start. The data from early 2026 shows a slight but measurable uptick in fathers who are opting for minimal parenting time agreements just to avoid the bankruptcy and emotional toll of a prolonged court battle. Robert's story, and the stories of thousands of men like him, highlight a fundamental disconnect in 2026. While society tells men to be more involved, the legal system often treats that involvement as a liability, or something that must be proven and defended at an exorbitant cost. We have documented the shift from the wallet to the witness stand. And the picture that emerges is one of a demographic under extreme pressure to perform perfection in a system that is designed to find flaws. But what happens when the legal battle ends? What happens when the gavel drops, the orders are signed, and the father is left to navigate the reality of a fractured family in a society that still doesn't quite know where to put him? Beyond the money and the courtrooms lies the most intimate and devastating demographic shift of all: the psychological landscape of the father-child bond under the shadow of the state. In the next part, we are going to explore the phenomenon of parental alienation and the demographic of the erased father. We will look at the psychological mechanics of how a child is turned against a parent, the 2026 data on reunification therapy, and why some fathers are being slowly deleted from their children's lives one memory at a time. This is the darkest chapter of our century of change, and it's happening in more households than you think. To understand the demographic of the erased father in 2026, we have to move beyond the legal arguments and into the psychological architecture of the family unit. In the previous parts of this masterclass, we discussed the financial and legal hurdles, but those are often external pressures. Parental alienation is an internal, biological, and psychological restructuring of a child's reality. By 2026, this has become one of the most documented yet least effectively managed phenomena in family court. It is the process by which one parent, through a campaign of denigration and emotional manipulation, convinces a child that the other parent is not only unnecessary but fundamentally dangerous or unloving. For the American father, this creates a demographic of parents in exile, men who are physically present in the world but have been effectively deleted from their own lineage. Imagine a man named Michael in 2026. Michael is a 40-year-old high school teacher in Seattle. Before the divorce, he was the primary recreational parent. He taught his son Leo how to ride a bike, how to code simple games, and spent every Saturday morning at the local park. When the marriage dissolved, the initial 50-50 custody order seemed like a fair outcome. But step by step, Michael began to see the signs of what psychologists call pathological alignment. It started with small, seemingly insignificant gatekeeping behaviors. Leo would arrive for Michael's week and mention that mom was very sad because she was going to be all alone. Then came the digital wall. In 2026, children are connected 24/7. Even during Michael's week, his son was being bombarded with text messages from the other house, asking if he was okay or if he felt safe. By the 6-month mark, the alienation had moved into a moderate phase. This is where the demographic data of 2026 shows a sharp uptick in litigation. Leo began to parrot adult language that was clearly not his own. He told Michael, "You were never really there for us financially," a phrase no 10-year-old naturally generates. In 2026, this is fueled by the transparency of the digital world. The alienating parent might show the child court documents or child support ledgers, out of context, to create a sense of financial betrayal. Michael went from being the fun dad to the source of the family's perceived suffering. The demographic reality for men like Michael is that they are fighting an invisible enemy. You cannot argue with a child's feeling, even if that feeling was manufactured by a trusted source. The demographic profile of the targeted parent in 2026 is surprising. Historical trends suggested that only uninvolved fathers were at risk of being erased. However, current case studies indicate the opposite. It is often the most involved and most bonded fathers who are targeted, precisely because their bond is seen as a threat to the alienating parent's emotional monopoly. The alienator often suffers from what is known as enmeshment, where their identity is so tied to the child that the father's presence is felt as a literal amputation of their own self. In the high-conflict demographic of 2026, this results in a scorched earth policy where the child's psychological health is collateral damage in a war of emotional attrition. In 2026, technology has provided new tools for this erasure. We see the rise of the digital voyeur father. This is a demographic of men who are blocked on all official channels, but spend their nights looking at their children's public social media profiles or gaming accounts just to see their faces. Imagine Michael sitting in his kitchen in Seattle, watching his son play a live-streamed video game. He can see Leo laughing and talking with friends, but Michael cannot join the chat. If he does, he is labeled a stalker or a harasser. The digital tools meant to connect us have become the new barbed wire fences of the custodial landscape. Data from 2025 suggests that nearly 30% of divorced fathers feel they have been digitally ghosted by their own children under the age of 18. The legal response to this in 2026 is often the implementation of reunification therapy. However, the data on the potential outcomes of these programs is sobering. Reunification therapy is an intensive, often court-ordered process where a specialist attempts to repair the broken bond. In a 2026 case study, we see that these programs have a high failure rate because they often start too late. By the time a judge orders therapy, the child has already spent a year or more in a state of hyperalignment with the alienating parent. For Michael, the therapy sessions became another arena for conflict. Every time he tried to bring up a happy memory from the past, Leo would shut down or claim the memory was a lie. This leads to the demographic of the exhausted father, men who have spent their life savings on experts only to have their child look them in the eye and say, "I hate you," for reasons they cannot even explain. This brings us to the most tragic demographic shift, the voluntary erasure. There is a specific group of fathers in 2026 who eventually stop fighting. These are not deadbeat dads. These are men who have been beaten by a system that refuses to enforce its own orders. They realize that every time they drag the other parent back to court to enforce their parenting time, the child is subjected to more emotional pressure and guilt at home. To save the child from the constant conflict, these fathers choose to step back. They become a forced absence. They hope that by disappearing they are giving their child a chance at a peaceful, albeit lopsided, childhood. They tell themselves that when the child turns 18 or 25, they will come looking for the truth. The data on these adult-child realizations is a burgeoning field of study in 2026. Long-term demographic tracking shows that approximately 40% of alienated children eventually realize the manipulation they were subjected to, often in their late 20s. But the demographic cost to the father is immense. By the time the child returns, the father has missed the graduations, the weddings, and the formative years. He is a stranger to his own child, and the grief of those lost decades is a psychological burden that 2026 health data links to high rates of chronic illness and depression among middle-aged divorced men. Step by step, the erasure of the father in the 21st century has moved from the physical to the digital to the psychological. In 1926, you were gone because you walked away. In 2026, you are gone because you were deleted. This creates a demographic of ghosts in our society, men who are walking through hardware stores and office buildings, performing their jobs and paying their taxes, while carrying the weight of a living bereavement. They are mourning children who are still alive, but who have been taught to believe that their father is a monster or a non-entity. As we analyze these demographics, we see that the American father is currently caught in a transition. We have moved past the era where fathers were just providers, but we have not yet reached an era where the system effectively protects the father-child bond from high-conflict sabotage. The erased father is the most extreme example of how our current legal and social structures are failing to keep pace with the complexity of modern family dynamics. But what about the fathers who do make it through? What about the men who successfully navigate the courtrooms, the finances, and the psychological warfare to maintain a healthy, stable presence in their children's lives? There is a group of fathers in 2026 who are redefining what it means to be a man after divorce. They are building new types of communities, using new technologies for support, and creating a new demographic of resilience. In the next part, we are going to look at the rise of the divorce community and the new brotherhood of 2026. We will explore the secret networks where fathers are sharing data, legal strategies, and mental health resources to ensure they don't just survive the divorce, but they thrive as parents. We are moving from the struggle to the solution. The silence that once defined the divorced father in 1926 was a symptom of a society that lacked the infrastructure for paternal connection. Back then, if you lost your family, you lost your social identity. You didn't talk about it at the local lodge or the factory floor. You carried the weight in isolation until it eventually crushed you, or you became a stranger to your own history. But in 2026, we are witnessing the birth of a new demographic, the connected father. This is a movement of men who have realized that while the legal system remains adversarial, the information landscape has become collaborative. We are moving from a state of individual desperation to a state of collective intelligence. The modern divorced father is no longer fighting a solo war in the dark. He is part of a massive, decentralized digital brotherhood that is sharing the blueprints for survival and success. Imagine a man named Chris in 2026. Chris is a 34-year-old aircraft technician living in Indianapolis. When his separation began, he initially followed the historical trend of withdrawal. He stopped going to the gym, he avoided his married friends, and he felt the familiar crushing weight of the administrative and financial burdens we have discussed. But Chris stumbled upon a private Discord community specifically for fathers in the Midwest navigating high-conflict litigation. This wasn't a place for venting or bitterness. It was a digital war room. In this community, Chris found a database of every family court judge in his county. This database included crowdsourced data on which judges favored 50-50 custody, how they reacted to certain legal arguments, and even how they typically ruled on requests for downward modifications of child support. This is the rise of crowdsourced law. In 2026, fathers are effectively bypassing the high-cost gatekeepers of the legal profession by pooling their knowledge. Step by step, Chris learned how to draft his own motions using templates provided by men who had already successfully navigated similar hurdles. He learned how to interpret the specific child support algorithms of Indiana, allowing him to walk into his attorney's office not as a passive client, but as an informed operator. Data from 2025 suggests that fathers who engage in these peer-to-peer legal support networks reduce their total legal spend by nearly 40%. This demographic shift is moving the divorced father from a position of financial victimhood to one of strategic management. Beyond the legal aspect, we are seeing a revolution in the way these men handle the double housing burden. In Part 2, we discussed how the cost of maintaining a family-sized home on a single income is the primary driver of paternal poverty in 2026. The solution emerging in this new demographic is the co-living dad house. Imagine if Chris, instead of struggling to pay for a 3-bedroom apartment alone, partners with 2 other divorced fathers from his support group. Together, they rent a large 5-bedroom house in a high-quality school district. They create a rotational schedule where each father has his children on specific weeks. This model, which has seen a 20% increase in adoption among divorced men in the last 3 years, solves multiple problems at once. First, it brings the individual housing cost down to a level that allows for financial recovery and retirement savings. Second, it provides an immediate built-in social network for the children. Instead of being isolated in a lonely apartment, the children have a household of peers going through the exact same transition. Third, it provides the fathers with immediate peer accountability. If Chris is having a bad day or feeling the paternal burnout we discussed in Part 3, there are 2 other men in the house who have been exactly where he is. This demographic is literally rebuilding the village that the modern economy and the legal system tore down. The 2026 father is also using technology to combat the strong father mask and the health risks associated with it. We are seeing a massive trend in the use of wearable biometric data as a tool for both personal health and legal defense. Case studies from 2026 show fathers using their Oura Ring or Apple Watch data to prove they are maintaining a healthy, stable lifestyle. If an allegation is made in court about a father's fitness or sobriety, he can now present 12 months of consistent sleep data, heart rate variability metrics, and even blood alcohol monitoring through wearable devices. This is the era of the quantified father. These men are using hard data to strip away the subjectivity of the best interests of the child standard. They are proving their stability with the same precision a professional athlete uses to track performance. Furthermore, the mental health landscape for this demographic has moved away from traditional clinical settings and toward active support groups. In 2026, we see a decline in men seeking one-on-one talk therapy and a surge in father-specific fitness communities, hiking clubs, and tactical training groups. These are spaces where vulnerability is reframed as a tool for resilience. Chris doesn't sit in a circle and talk about his feelings. He goes on a 10-mile ruck march with 20 other divorced dads. Somewhere around mile 8, the conversation naturally shifts to the challenges of co-parenting or the stress of an upcoming hearing. This is shoulder-to-shoulder support rather than eye-to-eye therapy. Historical trends indicate that men are significantly more likely to remain consistent with mental health work when it is tied to physical activity and a shared mission. This new brotherhood is also addressing the financial architecture we explored in Part 4. We are seeing the emergence of paternal mutual aid funds. These are decentralized, member-funded pools of capital designed to provide short-term, interest-free loans to fathers who hit a financial cliff. If a father like Chris loses his job, the community steps in to ensure his child support remains current, preventing the devastating credit score collapse and the subsequent loss of license or parenting time. This isn't charity. It's a strategic defense of the demographic's collective parental rights. They realize that when one father is pushed out of the system due to a temporary financial hiccup, it strengthens the precedent for the marginalization of all fathers. Step by step, the 2026 divorced father is evolving into a more resilient, more informed, and more connected version of the 1926 ghost. He is learning to navigate the system without being destroyed by it. He is finding ways to maintain his health, his wealth, and his bond with his children through innovative social and technological hacks. The potential outcomes for this demographic are a far cry from the isolation of previous generations. We are seeing the rise of a man who is comfortable with his role as a primary caregiver, competent in the language of the law, and rooted in a community of his peers. However, even with this new support system, there is one area that remains a demographic minefield. It is the transition from the divorced dad to the remarried dad, or the stepfather. As these men rebuild their lives, they enter a new set of demographic pressures. They have to balance the needs of their biological children with the expectations of new partners and, often, new stepchildren. The data on blended family volatility in 2026 shows that the success of a second marriage is heavily dependent on how well the father has integrated the lessons of his first divorce. In the next part, we are going to dive into the demographics of the new American family. We will look at the data on remarriage rates for divorced fathers in 2026, the specific challenges of the bonus dad role, and how the financial obligations of the first marriage impact the stability of the second. We will explore the recursive divorce phenomenon and why the second split is statistically more likely than the first, and more importantly, how the 2026 brotherhood is teaching men to beat those odds. We are moving from the recovery of the self to the rebuilding of the home. The transition from the recovery of the self to the rebuilding of the home represents the most complex demographic pivot a divorced father will ever make. In 2026, the demographic profile of the remarried father is fundamentally different from the 1970s archetype. Back then, a second marriage was often seen as a replacement for the first, a way to quickly restore the nuclear family structure. Today, it is a high-stakes negotiation of parallel lives. Data from 2025 and 2026 suggests that while nearly 65% of divorced fathers eventually enter a long-term cohabitating relationship or remarriage within 5 years, the potential outcomes for these new units are heavily dictated by the financial and legal residue of the previous union. We are seeing the rise of the blended architect, a father who must build a new life while the foundations of his old one are still being litigated or financially drained. Imagine if you are Brandon, a 44-year-old project manager living in the sprawling suburbs of Phoenix, Arizona, in 2026. Brandon is 3 years removed from a high-conflict divorce and has just married Sarah, who has a 7-year-old son of her own. Brandon represents the demographic known as the sandwich dad. This is a man caught between the obligations of his past and the aspirations of his future. Every month, Brandon's income is subjected to what the 2026 Brotherhood calls financial triage. He pays $1,400 in child support for his 2 biological daughters from his first marriage. Simultaneously, he is helping Sarah cover the costs of her son's private tutoring, because her ex-husband has effectively disappeared from the financial landscape. Brandon is effectively managing the logistics and economics of 3 different family branches. This demographic reality creates the resentment gap, a primary driver of the recursive divorce. Historical trends show that second marriages involving children from previous relationships have a failure rate exceeding 60%. In 2026, the data points to a specific trigger: the collision of separate financial histories. When Sarah wants to save for a down payment on a larger house to accommodate all 3 children during Brandon's custody weeks, she has to reckon with the fact that Brandon's borrowing power is capped by his support obligations and his previous debt-to-income ratio. The modern remarried father is a man whose economic ghost haunts his new dinner table. Case studies from 2026 indicate that the most successful blended families are those that maintain radical financial transparency and separate accounting. Yet the psychological toll of living in the red for a previous life can be a silent killer of the new romance. Step by step, the 2026 father in a blended family must also navigate the loyalty bind. This is the demographic shift into the role of the bonus dad. Unlike the mid-century stepfather who was often expected to be a primary disciplinarian, the 2026 bonus dad is a study in restrained authority. If Brandon becomes too involved in Sarah's son's life, attending every school meeting or setting firm household rules, he risks triggering a reactive litigation cycle from the biological father, who may perceive Brandon as a threat to his paternal status. If Brandon remains too distant, he is accused by Sarah of not being a true partner. This is the no man's land of modern parenting. The demographic data shows that fathers who successfully navigate this role are those who prioritize the supportive mentor archetype. They provide the resources and the presence without attempting to overwrite the existing biological hierarchy. We must also examine the demographic of the LAT father, living apart together. In 2026, we are seeing a massive 15% spike in divorced fathers who choose to enter long-term, committed relationships but refuse to cohabitate or remarry. These men are the ultimate risk mitigators. They have analyzed the potential outcomes of a second divorce and decided that the financial and emotional price is too high to pay twice. Imagine if Brandon and Sarah had chosen this path. They would maintain separate apartments, perhaps in the same complex, allowing each to focus entirely on their biological children during their respective custody weeks. This demographic is redefining the American family as a network of satellite homes rather than a single hub. It solves the problem of the step-sibling friction and the alimony cliff, but it introduces a new kind of social fragmentation that the census is only just beginning to track. For those who do choose the traditional remarriage path in 2026, the administrative burden is staggering. The modern blended father is a manager of a complex digital ecosystem. On any given Tuesday, Brandon is navigating 3 different co-parenting apps, 2 school portals, and 4 different Google Calendars. He is coordinating with Sarah's ex-husband, his own ex-wife, and the various sports coaches and therapists involved in all 3 children's lives. This is the paternal logistics manager demographic. Data suggests that the sheer volume of digital labor required to maintain a 2026 blended family is a leading cause of the paternal burnout we discussed in Part 3. When the systems desync, when a soccer practice is moved at the last minute, and it conflicts with a custody exchange for the other set of children, the resulting explosion can threaten the stability of the entire household. Furthermore, we must look at the impact of state-level legal variations on these new households. In some jurisdictions in 2026, the income of a new spouse is still being factored into the household income calculations for child support modifications, even though the new spouse has no legal obligation to support the children from the previous marriage. This creates a demographic of second wives who feel like their career success is being used to subsidize their husband's ex-wife. This creates a toxic atmosphere where the new family unit feels like it is being penalized by the state for trying to achieve middle-class stability. The 2026 Brotherhood is increasingly lobbying for step-parent income protection laws. But until those historical trends change, the remarried father remains an economic target. As we look at the rebuilding of the home, we see that the American father is no longer just a man with a family. He is a man managing a portfolio of relationships. The success of this demographic is not measured by the absence of conflict, but by the efficiency of its resolution. Brandon's ability to remain a calm, present father to his daughters while being a supportive partner to Sarah and a mentor to her son is the new gold standard of masculinity in 2026. It requires a level of diplomatic skill that was never required of Arthur in 1954 or even Mark in 1996. But what about the long-term impact on the children themselves? As these fathers rebuild their homes and navigate these complex demographics, what kind of world are they preparing their sons and daughters for? How has a century of changing demographics altered the very definition of what a child expects from a father? The data from 2026 suggests that we are raising a generation that views family as a flexible, negotiated contract, rather than an immutable blood bond. In the next part, we are going to look at the generational echo. We will dive into the data on the children of the century of change. We will explore how being raised by the demographic of the involved, litigated, and remarried father is changing the way the next generation views marriage, divorce, and the role of the state in the family. We are moving from the experience of the father to the legacy he leaves behind. The final demographic shift isn't about the men of today. It's about the men and women of tomorrow. To understand the legacy being left behind, we must look at the first generation of adults in 2026 who were raised entirely within the framework of the modern, litigated co-parenting era. These are the children of the 50-50 revolution, the heirs to the financial architecture of the 1990s and 2000s. We are currently witnessing a massive demographic shift in how these young adults perceive commitment, the state, and the very concept of fatherhood. If the 1926 child of divorce was defined by a sense of social shame and paternal absence, the 2026 adult child of divorce is defined by a sense of hyperrealism and legal awareness. They are the first demographic to view family not as an immutable blood bond, but as a series of negotiated contracts and state-monitored schedules. Imagine a character named Tyler. Tyler is 24 years old, a recent graduate working in the renewable energy sector in Raleigh, North Carolina. Tyler's parents divorced in 2012 when the 50-50 residential custody model was becoming the suburban standard. For Tyler, his entire childhood was a study in logistical precision. He grew up with a shared Google Calendar as his primary family anchor. He understood from the age of 8 that his time was a contested commodity. Now, as Tyler enters the dating pool of 2026, his demographic behavior is a direct echo of his father's experience. Data from 2025 and 2026 shows that adult children of high conflict or highly litigated divorces are 40% more likely to delay marriage indefinitely, opting instead for long-term cohabitation or the LAT living apart together model we discussed previously. Tyler doesn't view marriage as a romantic milestone. He views it as a significant legal liability. This demographic is creating the rise of the prenuptial generation. In 1926, a prenuptial agreement was a tool for the ultra-wealthy. In 2026, it is becoming a standard requirement for middle-class young adults whose fathers spent years in a financial squeeze. Tyler has seen the math. He remembers the years his father lived in a cramped apartment to ensure Tyler and his sister had bedrooms that met court standards. He saw the automatic income withholding and the stress of the quarterly child support reviews. Consequently, the potential outcomes for Tyler's generation are a radical move toward financial autonomy within relationships. Historical trends show that this generation is more likely to maintain separate bank accounts and individual property titles, even within a long-term partnership. They are effectively divorce-proofing their lives before they even start them. A demographic reaction to the century of change they witnessed from the backseat of their father's car during countless Sunday night exchanges. Let us look at a different case study. A 28-year-old woman named Maya living in Chicago. Maya represents the demographic of children who were part of the erasure phenomenon we explored in Part 6. Her father was marginalized by the court system in the early 2010s and eventually drifted into the secondary role of a visitor, before disappearing entirely when Maya was 12. In 2026, Maya is part of the Great Reconciliation. Thanks to the digital footprint of the modern era, Maya has spent her mid-20s conducting her own forensic investigation. She used public court records, archived social media posts, and the 2026 Brotherhood networks to find the father she was told didn't want her. Step by step, Maya's journey reflects a broader demographic trend of adult children seeking the paternal truth. When she finally met her father, she didn't find the monster described in the old litigation. She found a man who had been economically and psychologically broken by a system he didn't have the resources to fight. The demographic impact of these reconciliations is profound. We are seeing a 15% increase in adult children in 2026 moving to be closer to their aging, divorced fathers, often providing the social and physical care that the father's lack of a spouse would otherwise make impossible. Maya's generation is reclaiming the fathers that the 20th century legal system tried to delete, but the emotional scar tissue remains a defining feature of their demographic profile. Furthermore, we must address the demographic of the digital native child. These are children who grew up with the co-parenting apps as a third parent. In 2026, this has resulted in a generation that is uniquely skilled in conflict mediation, but also highly cynical about privacy. Imagine if your primary communication between your parents for 15 years was through a court-monitored app where every message was subject to judicial review. These young adults have a different relationship with the state. They don't view the government as a distant entity. They view the family court as a roommate that never left. This has led to a demographic shift toward libertarian-leaning views on family law. Data suggests that 2020 SIXS young voters are the most vocal proponents of alimony reform and mandatory 50-50 custody laws, not because they are fathers yet, but because they saw the inefficiency and pain of the discretionary system firsthand. The economic legacy is equally complex. We are seeing the emergence of the inheritance gap. Because so many divorced fathers in the last century spent their peak earning years funding two households and paying high-interest legal fees, the intergenerational transfer of wealth for this demographic is significantly lower than for children of intact families. Tyler and Maya are starting their adult lives with less of a safety net. Historical trends indicate that divorced fathers are 50% less likely to be able to assist their children with a down payment on a home compared to married fathers in the same income bracket. This creates a demographic of young adults who are more reliant on their own gig economy hustle, mirroring the financial volatility their fathers navigated in the 2010s and 2020s. However, there is a positive demographic shift in emotional intelligence. Children who were raised by involved, modern divorced fathers, the men who wore the strong father mask but stayed present, report a more nuanced understanding of masculinity. They saw their fathers cook, clean, manage schedules, and navigate emotional crises. The demographic of the 2026 young man is, for the first time in a century largely comfortable with the idea of being a primary caregiver. They have seen it modeled not as an exception but as a hard-won right. The legacy of the century of change is a generation of men who are prepared for the domestic sphere in a way the men of 1926 couldn't have imagined. The final layer of this generational echo is the normalization of the bonus family. In 1926, a step-parent was often a replacement for a deceased parent. In 2026, the demographic reality is a sprawling network of parents, step-parents, and half-siblings. This has created a generation with a high degree of social flexibility. They are used to navigating multiple sets of rules, multiple holiday celebrations, and complex social hierarchies. While this can lead to the paternal burnout we discussed earlier for the children, it often results in a broader, more diverse support network. The 2026 adult child of divorce is a master of the social pivot, a trait that makes them highly adaptable in the modern volatile workforce. As we look at Tyler and Maya, we see the culmination of 100 years of social engineering, legal battles, and economic shifts. They are the living evidence of how the American father has been redefined. They carry the financial caution of the 1980s, the digital transparency of the 2010s, and the psychological resilience required to survive the 2020s. They are the proof that while the system may be broken, the bond can be preserved, if the father is willing to endure the transition. But as we reach the end of this century of change, a massive question remains. We have seen the ghosts of 1926, the breadwinners of the 1950s, the litigators of the 1990s, and the co-parents of 2026. We have seen the money, the courtrooms, the health crises, and the generational echoes. But where is the breaking point? Is the current model of the American family sustainable, or are we on the verge of the most radical shift yet? In the final part of this masterclass, we are going to synthesize everything. We will look at the 2027 to 2030 projections for the American father. We will explore the emerging technologies, from AI-driven legal mediation to the new frontiers of the men's rights movement, that are set to dismantle the family court system as we know it. We are going to reveal the one demographic trend that almost no one is talking about, which will determine the fate of the American father for the next 100 years. The century of change is ending, but the new era is just beginning. As we step into the late 2020s, the most significant disruption to the demographic of the American father is the arrival of algorithmic mediation. Imagine a man named Marcus in 2027. Marcus is a 32-year-old civil engineer in Nashville. Unlike the fathers of 1926 who were silenced by social shame, or the fathers of 1996 who were drained by billable hours, Marcus represents the first generation of the data-driven parent. When his partnership dissolves, he does not start by hiring an adversarial litigator. Instead, he and his former partner enter a state-sanctioned AI mediation portal. This is not a science fiction concept. By 2026, several jurisdictions have begun piloting these systems to clear the massive backlog of family court cases. The AI analyzes 10 years of their financial records, their digital calendars, and their children's school performance. It then generates a neutral path. This path is based on the potential outcomes of thousands of similar cases in Tennessee, removing the subjective bias of a single judge. For Marcus, the demographic shift here is one of financial democratization. He is no longer part of the litigated-out demographic we discussed in Part 5. Because the cost of this mediation is a fraction of a traditional retainer, Marcus is able to preserve his capital for his children's future rather than exhausting it in the witness stand. Step by step, we are seeing the legal system move from a theater of conflict to a laboratory of efficiency. However, this technological shift is running headlong into the one demographic trend that almost no one is talking about: the institutional withdrawal of the American male. When we look at the data from 2024 through 2026, we see a staggering decline in marriage rates among men under the age of 35. This is not merely a social preference. It is a calculated demographic response to the century of change we have documented. Young men have watched the historical trends of the last 100 years. They have seen their fathers and grandfathers navigate the breadwinner trap, the silver bullet of litigation, and the double housing burden. Consequently, Marcus's younger brothers are increasingly opting for commitment without contract. This creates a new demographic category in 2026, the unmarried paternal stakeholder. These are men who are fully committed to their children, but have intentionally avoided the legal framework of marriage to mitigate the risk of a state-controlled asset split. This shift is forcing a total rewrite of family law. Historical trends suggest that by 2030, more than 50% of paternal demographic data, will come from non-marital households. The problem this generation faces is that while they have avoided the divorce court, they often lack the established legal protections of the custodial system. The potential outcomes for this demographic are a new wave of paternity establishment litigation that will dominate the early 2030s. Let us look at the paternal political bloc of 2026. For the first century of our study, fathers were a fragmented demographic. They identified by their jobs, their religions, or their political parties, but rarely by their status as divorced parents. That has changed. In 2026, we are seeing the rise of the single-issue paternal voter. This is a man like Marcus who, regardless of his other political leanings, votes specifically for candidates who support presumptive equal shared parenting and Title IV reform. We are seeing a demographic that has found its voice through the decentralized networks we explored in Part 7. They are now large enough and organized enough to function as a swing vote demographic in key states like Ohio, Florida, and Pennsylvania. This political awakening is driving the transparency revolution. Case studies from 2026 show that fathers are no longer willing to accept the black box of the best interests of the child standard. They are demanding that the metrics used by the state to determine custody and support be made public and verifiable. Imagine if Marcus's child support wasn't just a number on a page, but a dynamic calculation that updated in real time based on his actual parenting hours and the local cost of living index. This is the move toward the programmable family. It removes the transactional resentment that has plagued the divorced father demographic for decades. By 2028, we expect to see the first states adopt smart contracts for child support, where funds are released specifically for verified child-related expenses, solving the transparency problem that has fueled paternal frustration for a century. We must also address the demographic of the paternal health rebound. As the strong father mask is discarded in favor of the radical transparency we discussed in Part 3, we are seeing a shift in the physical and mental health data. In 2026, for the first time in 50 years, the life expectancy gap for divorced fathers has stopped widening. This is directly tied to the rise of the paternal collective. Men are no longer dying in isolation. They are part of a demographic that views self-care as a tactical necessity for their children's well-being. Marcus doesn't view his mental health as a weakness. He views it as a piece of equipment that must be maintained. The data shows that fathers in 2026 are 20% more likely to engage in preventative health screenings than their counterparts in 2016. But what is the ultimate legacy of this century? We have moved from 1926, where the father was a ghost, to 1956, where he was a provider, to 1996, where he was a visitor, to 2026, where he is a co-architect. The demographic evolution of the American father is the story of a man fighting to get back into his own home. It is a century-long journey from the periphery to the center. The data from 2026 tells us that the modern father is more resilient, more informed, and more present than any generation in American history. He has survived the weaponization of the law and the volatility of the economy. He has rebuilt his brotherhood and redefined his health. The potential outcomes for the next 100 years are rooted in the decentralization of the family. We are moving away from a model where the state is the primary arbiter of the paternal bond, and toward a model where the father-child relationship is protected by data, community, and a new understanding of paternal value. Marcus in 2027 isn't just a divorced dad. He is the pioneer of a new type of masculinity that prioritizes presence over power and collaboration over conflict. The century of change has stripped away the old illusions of the nuclear family and replaced them with a gritty, functional, and deeply committed demographic of men who refuse to be erased. As we conclude this deep dive masterclass, look at the timeline. In 100 years, the American father has been dismantled and reconstructed. We have analyzed the financial architecture, the legal traps, the health risks, and the generational echoes. The roadmap is now clear. The future of the American father is not found in the courtrooms of the past, but in the collectives of the future. The transition is nearly complete. The era of the invisible father is over. The era of the integrated father has begun. Every statistic, every case study, and every data point we have explored leads to this one undeniable conclusion. The American father is no longer a guest in his children's lives. He is the foundation, and he is here to stay.